All right, we're live. If you're watching this in the future, I hope you're doing well. Got just a few minutes here, going to answer a few questions for you, help spread some awareness and some encouragement for you guys who are struggling with anxiety, panic attacks, depersonalization, realization, trauma, things like that. So I'll go ahead and just wait for people to jump on. If you're watching, let me know in the chat where you're watching from. So we got one person watching. Hope you're doing well. Maybe we got two people watching. Let me know who you are, where you're from. Hey Phil, good to see you, man. Still from Colorado. Awesome. Yentl says, so hard right now, I feel like I'm going psychotic. Well, sorry to hear that, and that's very common. I know that whenever I was struggling with particularly panic attacks and depersonalization, it truly made me feel like I was going crazy. It never happened, but I definitely felt like it was going to happen. Whenever you're in a very anxious state, or especially a panic state, or maybe you reach a state of traumatic stress, which is overwhelming the nervous system, you become very irrational. The prefrontal cortex starts to shut down, which is logical, critical, creative, and contextual thinking. And your brain goes into something called catastrophic risk assessment, which is basically where your brain is feeding you with all kinds of catastrophic scenarios in an effort to keep you alive, because your brain thinks that you're about to be eaten by a lion. So your brain's being very catastrophic, trying to make you aware of absolutely all the catastrophic possibilities. And one of those catastrophic possibilities that your mind presents you with is the fear of going crazy. What if you're losing your mind? And I remember it felt so real to me that I remember sitting at this table at my mom's house, and I was like, I'm the guy that lost his mind. I'm the guy that's not going to be able to have a family or a future. It just felt so real. But it wasn't. It was just an illusion created by my mind because of the state that I was in. So, what's up, Angad? Good to see you. Yentl says, had it for 8 years now. So what is it? Whenever you say it, what are you referring to specifically? You said, thought I had under control, but now it's at 200%. Yeah, so I always tell people, recovery is not the most recent, largest break from symptoms that you've had. Even if that break has been years, that means that the root has not been dealt with. And I always tell you guys, the root are things happening in your body. There's a lot of tension, adrenaline, emotion, and fatigue. And then there's usually a lot of lifestyle adjustments that need to happen. Maybe you're not prioritizing rest and nutrition and giving your body enough rest and relaxation that it needs. Maybe you don't have enough boundaries in life. Maybe you're connected to toxic or even abusive people, and it's just wrecking your nervous system. You know, healing from a state of trauma is really all about listening to the body. This is interoception, the experience of the embodied self, getting back in your body and listening to your body. And I know for me, for years, I didn't listen to my body. And I lived in my head all day. And I paid for it. My body became a war zone that was not safe to live in. And while I was in my head obsessing over existence or my health or people's opinions of me or this thing or that, the past, the future, my body was building up more and more with tension, adrenaline, and emotion. And eventually that hit an overwhelm point. It's like filling up water in a cup. And That's a trauma state, a state of overwhelm in the nervous system. And then depersonalization, realization are dissociative symptoms. Dissociation comes from a Latin root word that means to sever or separate. So depersonalization, realization is your brain trying to help separate you from the overwhelm that's happening in your body. That's why depersonalization makes you feel separated from your body, because that's your brain trying to help you. Hey, there's too much pain in here. Let's get them out, right? As well as derealization, feeling like everything is fake and dreamlike. That's your brain trying to separate you from your life, because maybe to be present in the moment for you is overwhelming because there's all kinds of things happening in your life that need to be dealt with. Yentl says, what can I do to recover? So I'm talking about all the things, right? Building interoception, self-regulating, releasing the buildup in the body, making these lifestyle adjustments. Of course, we are accepting applications if you would like to work with us, to help you with these things. We'd be happy to take a look at your situation. There's a link in any of my videos, on my profile, on my YouTube channel as well. There's also a free 45-minute masterclass called The 5 Shifts that really goes in depth as well. But I always tell people I can't help you recover over a live stream, but I can encourage you and get you in the right direction. Ooh, this is a good question. So Phil G says, why are some of us more sensitive to DPDR than others? You see people go through some really terrible things and they don't experience DPDR, while it feels like my trauma has been much less than theirs. So it's important to remember that trauma is not an event. It's a state of nervous system overwhelm. And there are two factors that determine if somebody goes into a trauma state whenever they experience stressful situations. Number one, does that person have a history of traumatic stress? Because if you have a history of traumatic stress, your brain is already hardwired to very quickly put you into a trauma response. The pathways have already been laid. Number two, does that person have the ability to self-regulate, which is to keep the tension, adrenaline, emotion out of their body? So an example that I go over with my clients quite a bit is like, let's say somebody gets into a car accident and you've got two people in the car accident. And we're not talking like the car's totaled and all that stuff, but let's just say like a little bit more than a fender bender. It's like a medium severity car accident, but everybody ends up being okay. Well, you can have person one who doesn't have a history of traumatic stress and does have the presence of self-regulation skills. They know how to calm themselves down. And they may walk away from that car accident being a little stirred up, but not in a trauma state, not at a state of overwhelming stress. But then person number two, let's say that they do have a history of traumatic stress and they don't know how to self-regulate. Well, that person may end up in a trauma state, right? Because of those two factors. So that's why like this whole idea that trauma is an event, like car accident, natural disaster, losing a loved one, going off to war, you would be shocked at the statistics on how many soldiers come back from war traumatized. It's not as many as you would think. There are a lot of them that do, of course. In fact, the very first definition of trauma came from war soldiers in World War II. They used to call it shell shock. And it was originally believed that only war soldiers could experience trauma. Now, of course, since that initial understanding, we now know that trauma is much more far expansive. I mean, I continually work with stay-at-home moms and college students and, just regular, ordinary people, business owners. We've got an emergency room physician that's in our program right now. And just people that, they don't have a history of car accidents and going off to war or being in natural disasters or, nobody tried to kill them or anything like that. But they do have a painful history. They've been through a lot of stress, and that stress created what's called a sensory trigger, which is whenever your brain associates the sensory data around you with threat because of a painful past experience, and your brain assigns the procedure to fight or flight response or even the freeze to that sensory data. And now anytime that you see, hear, taste, touch, smell something that is sensorially similar to that painful past experience, your body is going to subconsciously go into these autonomic responses. And it usually starts just with stress and fight or flight response. But whenever your body's going into these responses over and over and over again, it's all gas pedal, no brake pedal, because you haven't learned how to self-regulate and you're not making the appropriate lifestyle adjustments. It's all going to build up. And whenever people don't know how to self-regulate, just like I didn't, they still try to get back to homeostasis. They try to get back to balance. But because they don't know how to self-regulate and make the appropriate lifestyle adjustments, and they don't have proper co-regulation, what they usually do is look to addiction. They look to food or porn or nicotine or drugs, or alcohol is a really big one. Or, maybe they look to, just mentally checking out, scrolling through social media all day, or continually watching Netflix, or even health anxiety can sometimes be a dissociative outlet, a way to separate from having to be interoceptive and feel what's happening in your body, or obsession over existence, or sometimes people throw themselves into their career or even academic studies. But whenever we don't know how to self-regulate, we don't have proper co-regulation, which is when somebody else calms us down. Because we're wired to get back to balance, we are going to find some way, even if it's an unhealthy way. But I always tell people, if you do have a bunch of addictive behaviors in your life, or you tend to just be mentally checked out all the time, it's not because you're a bad person. You're a good person. You just have a painful history and you haven't been taught how to self-regulate yet. And you're just trying to feel better. That's why we have to stop asking the question, what's wrong with you? And we need to start asking the question, what happened to you? And the people that I work with, they're just like me. They have a very painful history, and that painful history is informing their current nervous system experience, and they're experiencing biologically correct autonomic responses for the state of their body. And so, anyway, that's why I don't like the labels that get put on people, right? Because their body's reacting as it should for the state that they're in. It's just at the wrong time. They're going into fight, flight, freeze when there is no threat, which is why what I do with my clients is I help convey safety to the nervous system and the body. That's how we're going to get their body out of these threat responses of fight, flight, freeze. So anyway, why are some people more sensitive to DPDR than others? It has to do with their history of traumatic stress, as well as the lack of self-regulatory ability. Dennis says, or Denise, how are you doing? Hope you're doing good. Is it normal that I can act normally even though I'm lost and I don't know what I'm doing or where I am? Yeah, so my clients talk about this all the time. They're just kind of sort of, going through the motions, right? They're emulating the facial expressions and mannerisms of normality, but on the inside, they feel like death. And because of that, a lot of times people think that they're fine. They think that there can't be anything going on that's severe because of how normal that they look on the outside. But what I tell people is, you can be completely depersonalized or derealized or just extremely anxious, and on the outside it appears as if you're fine. And that's why a lot of people don't take some of these symptoms seriously, is because they're looking exclusively to the outside to determine what's going on the inside. And sometimes those two things can contradict one another, right? So Viv says, what are your thoughts on psychedelic therapy to reset the neural pathways? So, I mean, I'm all for people feeling better. And there seems to be a lot of emerging studies and research that shows the efficacy of psychedelics to help people with trauma. However, with that being said, I've been helping trauma sufferers and anxiety sufferers for, 6 years now. I think it's going on 7. And I would say, between 30% and 40% of them came to me because of a bad drug experience. Now, of course, not only psychedelics. In fact, it's usually marijuana. That's like the most common one. But, dimethyltryptamine, whether they get that through the ayahuasca plant or, some other means, acid. I've got 2 people in the program that mushrooms really, really affected them and put them into a trauma state. So it's like, it seems like with drugs, whether it's psychedelic or non-psychedelic, it's either going to go really good or really bad. And so that's where I'm a bit concerned. And not only that, not only does this drug experience have a chance to go really bad and actually have a paradoxical effect where it makes you feel even worse, but it also doesn't acknowledge that we need to learn how to self-regulate. Let's say that somebody had a really profound experience with a psychedelic drug and it, helped them process their emotions or calm their nervous system and help rewire their brain. Well, that's good and great. But what about whenever they have more painful experiences in life and their brain forms sensory triggers? Are they just going to have to keep going back to the psychedelics over and over again? Right? So ultimately, you're going to have to learn how to listen to your body and self-regulate, even if a psychedelic was to help somebody. So anyway, I'm very, very hesitant and skeptical about that. About everybody's looking for that one thing that's going to heal trauma. It's been like that for a long time now. And yet, what's interesting is I can show you a lot of research that shows that 45% of what heals trauma is co-regulation. People heal people. That's one of the reasons why I've been able to help so many people, is because I've been through this and I can relate with people. And that creates a lot of hope in relationship. Humans heal humans. And this is not exclusive to humans. This is a mammalian pursuit. All mammals will pursue other mammals to help heal them. Like, elephants have been observed in the wild kind of like slapping trunks and, kind of calming each other down. I think chimpanzees sometimes will kind of like groom each other and kind of, do different things to regulate. We observe this in other mammals. And so whenever your brain is perceiving threat, the first thing that you'll look to is other people to help calm you down. And if that doesn't work, then you go into fight or flight response, then you go into the freeze response. But we are wired to heal each other. I can show you studies that show that 45% of healing trauma is co-regulation, and I would include anxiety in that. And so, I can show you studies that show that methodology is only about 15% of healing. But that's what everybody's looking for. They're looking for one thing that's going to make all their symptoms permanently go away, and it's just not true. Like, that's not going to work, right? And I think it's neglecting to look to the fact that humans heal humans, right? Now, methodology is important, and that's why I've been telling you guys over and over again, you got to listen to your body. You have to release the buildup in the body of tension, adrenaline, and emotion. You have to make proper lifestyle adjustments. But at the end of the day, nothing heals people more than a safe people or a safe person. So Wiggly Sniff, first of all, that's a really funny name. I smoked weed constantly for 9 years, and I'm scared that I've done permanent damage and won't come out of DPDR. It feels like I changed my brain functioning permanently. Is it still possible to heal? So, I would always encourage you to see a doctor. And whenever it comes to getting a referral to a neurologist, what I've observed after working with thousands of people who have seen a doctor, because we highly encourage people to see a doctor before they work with us, is typically if the doctor doesn't observe any clear neurological impairment, they won't even give a referral to a neurologist. Now, some people, even though they've gotten a clear medical evaluation, they will just find a way to get to a neurologist. and, get a, brain scan of some sort. And almost always there's nothing there. But anyway, but I would highly encourage you to get a medical evaluation. It's very, very, very important. But in terms of this fear that you've done permanent brain damage because of smoking marijuana, or let's even extend this to any sort of drugs, that is one of the most common fears. In fact, literally, it was either today or yesterday, I was talking to a client that just signed up to work with us in my RISE program who has that same fear. So I just want to encourage you and let you know that you're not alone in that fear. And I had that fear. I remember whenever I smoked the marijuana in 2008, for those of you who know my story, and I was just still suffering after a long time with DPDR and panic and constant anxiety. I mean, I was like, maybe my friends laced the weed with something and it's done permanent brain damage. But that was deductive reasoning based upon a lack of education. And that's why one of the things I do with my clients is I give them like 6-7 hours of the latest neuroscience whenever it comes to the nervous system and trauma and anxiety. Because once you start to see, especially complex trauma, it really helps give a lot of explanation as to why the symptoms have not gone away after the bad drug experience. It's because a lot of people, not all people, but a lot of people look to these drugs because they're not feeling good. They're feeling stressed, they're feeling anxious, and they want to feel better. But ironically, sometimes the drugs that they look to as an analgesia become the very thing that escalates their nervous system into a trauma state and ends up producing symptoms that are far more severe than the pain that caused them to initially pursue the drugs to feel better. But it's important to understand this because when you observe your state through the lens of complex trauma, you'll understand that it wasn't just the bad marijuana experience that led to perpetual traumatic stress and depersonalization, realization. It was that bad drug experience coupled with all of the painful experiences that led up to the bad drug experience. And that was really eye-opening for me. And I had spent years thinking that the marijuana broke my brain and I did permanent brain damage and there was something wrong with the marijuana. But once I started to think about it through the lens of complex trauma, I was like, you know what? I lost my grandma prematurely in high school. I did not deal with that, never really processed the emotion very well. I was severely bullied, and I'm not saying this to play the victim. I'm just talking about understanding my past through the lens of complex trauma. But I was severely, severely bullied from the time I was a kid all the way up until really, until I learned how to do mixed martial arts in like, maybe that 9th grade. But anyway, parents went through a really messy divorce that just devastated our home. I didn't have a whole lot of social connection at all. My brothers pretty much bullied me a lot. Just grew up in a broken home and became very stressed and anxious. I also watched a bunch of scary movies. And for those of you who have children, I would highly encourage you to not allow your children to ever watch scary movies, even if they want to. Because I'm telling you, especially before the frontal lobe is fully formed, which is about age 25, I just think we're especially vulnerable to trauma from watching scary or horror movies. But anyway, I was very traumatized by Signs, if you guys have ever seen that with Mel Gibson. I watched that at the movie theaters whenever I was like, I don't even know, 12 or 13, whatever. And that gave me literally flashbacks and nightmares for like a decade or something. I mean, it was a long time, several years. And Jeepers Creepers was another movie. I mean, it's just like my creative mind and just anxiety. It's just like I had all kinds of nightmares and triggers about all kinds of things, started to develop severe health anxiety, became obsessed with existence. Anyway, so I basically didn't think I was smart. I basically felt like I was stupid and I had no future. And so I looked to the marijuana to make me feel better. I was like, oh, we could just play Guitar Hero and just smoke weed and get high. This will be great. So I looked to the marijuana to feel better, but that's what led to a severe panic attack. I felt deja vu while I was smoking it, and it led to severe DPDR and anxiety and all kinds of stuff. So I see this all the time with my clients and people that I come across. So no, I doubt your brain is permanently broken, but you definitely should see a doctor and see what they say. And if you're really concerned, you know, see a neurologist if you're able to get in front of one. And yeah, I mean, ultimately, a brain scan is the only thing that's really going to tell you if there's any brain damage. But I'll just tell you, from my experience of working with a lot of people, it's just very rare that there's any sort of neurological issues that are producing the DVR. It does happen every now and then, and that's why, you know, like especially in the case of like a concussion or something. I've had a few people I've worked with over the years that, you know, they hit their head really hard and there was some temporary brain damage, but they were able to, you know, find healing, working with the neurologist and self-regulation as well, and a couple things. So anyway, but it's extremely rare that there's some sort of medical or neurological issue, but it does happen sometimes, and that's why it is paramount that you see a doctor, right? Rex said weed triggered mine for the first time as well, right? And see, what was very confusing for me, and I want to share a little bit of my story really quick, is the first go around lasted about a year, and I finally started to invite in my panic. I came across acceptance, and I got the panic attacks to go away, the DPDR went away, but I didn't have panic attacks anymore, but I was still pretty anxious now that I look back, and I was still having DPDR every now and then, but it was so small, I was like, oh, this is manageable. But years and years went by, and I hadn't touched weed in years, and the DPDR came back. And that was really scary for me because I had connected the DPDR with marijuana. And because it had been years since I had smoked marijuana, I really thought I was going crazy the second time that it happened. And then it lasted again for about a year until I finally started to shift to a body-based approach. And that's what really got me the results. And that's what I teach my clients. But anyway, the DPDR was never connected exclusively to the weed. It was connected to overwhelm in my body. The weed just exacerbated. And then the second go around, I was in an abusive relationship, and I was at a job that was quite abusive, way too physically demanding, and just had so much stress. And I went through a lot of religious trauma, and it all just built up. And one day I was actually visualizing this really negative outcome, and then bam, I'll never forget, DPDR hit me like a ton of bricks years after I'd smoked the marijuana. And I was like, oh God, it's back. Like I thought it was over with. So I can't remember my own face either. Absolutely. Yeah, I used to look in the mirror and I literally would see a stranger, and it got so bad, it was so uncomfortable that I stopped looking in the mirror. I would literally just look down whenever I was brushing my teeth and getting ready. Like I hated looking in the mirror. It felt like a stranger. It was very bizarre and terrifying. What do I do when I have DPDR and my parents aren't supportive and are upset, disappointed at me, and don't understand me, and they expect me to be cured of DPDR in a short period of time? Well, first of all, I'm very sorry to hear that, but, you know, don't expect anybody to really understand your DPDR. Like, they're just not going to get it unless they've experienced it. The symptoms are invisible, and they're almost impossible to describe outside of metaphoric language. And so people have a tendency to not take it serious. But they don't understand that DPDR are death symptoms. Now, you're not dying, so don't be stressed with me saying that. But your brain thinks that you're dying because there's so much stress in your body. And DPDR are dissociative symptoms that are designed to mitigate the pain of death, of being eaten by a lion. You're so overwhelmed in your nervous system. And by the way, that doesn't mean you're having a panic attack. Overwhelm doesn't equal panic attack. It just means your nervous system is at a point where you're not able to cope with the level of stress. And so that's what would happen if you were fleeing from a lion and got so fatigued and overwhelmed that you couldn't flee anymore. Maybe you first tried to fight the lion and then you fled from it. There's a certain point of exhaustion and fatigue where you would transition into the freeze response, which is the dorsal vagal branch of the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's also called the shutdown response. It's a response in mammals designed to mitigate the pain of being eaten. It's technically feigned death. It's playing dead in hopes that the predator walks away, because predators prioritize the prey that puts up a fight. But it's also your body shutting down just in case the predator doesn't believe that you're dead and doesn't walk away, right? It's kind of depersonalization, realization are an escape when there is no escape. So anyway, don't expect your parents to understand it. They're not going to. And you have to focus on getting in your body again and releasing the buildup. And I've got a master class. It's the 5 shifts, how to heal from anxiety, panic, and depersonalization, realization. It's a link in my profile. Any of my long form videos, check that out. That's going to give you a lot of help. And there's a link to apply to work with us as well, if you'd like for us to take a look at your situation. But hang in there. And I'm so sorry that you're going through that. Because it's like, it's one thing if people don't get you, but it's another thing if they come against you. Because it's like you're already dealing with traumatic stress, and then you've got your family coming against you. That's just, and you know, they're probably scared. You know, sometimes people respond with anger and aggression out of fear. And it may actually be because they care about you and they don't know how to help you. And so it's making them stressed out, and that's manifesting in the form of anger and disappointment in those things. It's very unnerving as a parent if you can't help your child in their suffering. It's very stressful. I tell you that as a father of, 3 kids. Yeah, so hyper-awareness of consciousness is part of, existential obsession and rumination that is oftentimes triggered by DPDR, but not always. Depersonalization, realization are very existential symptoms because you feel detached from your body, which is how we communicate with the material world, or you feel detached from the material world itself, which is derealization. And so sometimes when people experience depersonalization, realization, it expands their awareness of consciousness and existence, and that expansion of awareness is so eye-opening and so profound and so enlightening even, that coupled with a creative mind and being a thinker leads to existential obsession. And I know for me, I was like, how could everybody not think about the fact that we're these human beings floating around on planet Earth, and the idea that, we're all humans having our own unique experiences, and then what about the afterlife, and what is matter, and what is this? And I just went down this wormhole, and I would just obsess over that for hours and hours and hours and hours, trying to get clarity to these questions. But I always tell people, you're not going to fix it with your mind. Regardless of whether the existential obsession was triggered by DPR or not, you're not going to fix it with your mind. And one question is going to lead to a next question, to a next question. You got to step out of the boxing ring and just live your life. And self-regulate. Get your body in a much better state so that the DPDR shuts off. That's producing the existential awareness, if that's the cause of it. I was getting smelling salts the first time I had depersonalization. It really did bring me back to earth. Okay, interesting. I don't recommend that, but that's interesting. I'm glad you feel better. So also, existential obsession and rumination can also be the byproduct of just you don't feel fulfilled in life. Whenever you don't feel fulfilled in your existence, it's very common to question your existence. The example that I give is like, let's say there's an eagle, and instead of the eagle flapping its wings and soaring through the clouds like it's supposed to, it's chained down. Its wings are chained to the bottom of a mountain. An eagle might, let's say an eagle could talk. It might be like, well, what's my purpose? Like, why am I here? Right? And so existential obsession is not always the byproduct of DPDR. It can be that. It can be a lack of fulfillment in life. It also could be a dissociative outlet to escape the trauma in your body, or even just anxiety in your body. Because if you're always in your head contemplating existence, the afterlife, the nature of reality, you don't have to feel the pain of what's happening in your body or the pain that's happening in your life. Maybe there's some situations that you're not addressing, or you're in just a really tough situation. So again, dissociation comes from a Latin word that means to separate. And so your brain can come up with all kinds of ways to separate you from painful experiences, either in your body or in your life. And obsession with existence can be one way that your brain allows you to kind of just check out of your body and out of your life. Because if you're always in your head going from one question to the next question, from one theory to the next theory, you're not in your body and you're not in the present moment. So even health anxiety can be a dissociative outlet, a way to separate from pain in your body and life. Feeling stuck in your body, you're asking, is feeling stuck in your body part of depersonalization? It's very common to experience in concurrence with depersonalization. Yeah, I remember that. That was absolutely terrifying. I would feel trapped in my body, like I couldn't escape, and I would kind of move around, and I just felt so out of control because of that. And so, yeah, that's extremely, extremely common. I hear that a lot with my clients, is they kind of feel trapped in their body. And you can't run from your body, obviously, because this is how we are, experiencing this life right now. And so it makes you feel overwhelmed, and it can lead to panic and even overwhelm. Will the hyper-awareness eventually go away, or is it stuck? Well, again, it goes back to the root of why it's there. Why is it there? I listed, 3 to 4 possibilities, but, if you see, this is a mistake that people make, whether it's existential obsession or DPDR or anxiety, is they tend to see those symptoms as the root problem. And they're spending all their time trying to directly get rid of symptoms that are actually biologically correct for the state of their body and nervous system. That's like if you had a bacterial infection, instead of taking antibiotics, you're focused on trying to manage the sneezing or the runny nose. Now, that's not bad, and I'm not totally against doing things in the short term just to feel better. But ultimately, whenever it comes to anxiety and panic and trauma and DPDR and even existential obsession and even health anxiety, the roots are not the symptoms. It's mainly things happening in the body and your life that need to be dealt with. And so all that time that you're spending trying to wrestle away the symptoms is really a waste of time. And there are entire movements that are based upon this direct approach, and it does produce some results for people, but they don't last because you're never really dealing with the root. It's like picking apples off an apple tree. Whenever you pick an apple off an apple tree, there is a gap between whenever you pick it and the apple grows back. But that doesn't mean that another apple is not growing. And until you uproot the apple tree, the apples are going to keep growing. And people mistake that gap between when you pick the apple and whenever it grows back as an indication that they're recovering. People are like, yeah, I recovered 4 different times. Now, you've never recovered. If the symptoms keep coming back, that is the ultimate revelation that you have not really dealt with the roots yet. And that's what I had to do in my life to get free of this, is I had to start dealing with the roots. I had to get back in my body. I had to experience my body. And man, was it painful at first. I didn't realize how much tension, adrenaline, emotion, fatigue had built up. And then I had to start to self-regulate, release those things. I had to walk away from some toxic relationships and learn, even abusive relationships, narcissistic abuse, and learn how to have boundaries and be a little bit more assertive. I had to start prioritizing sleep and, challenge my mind instead of ruminating all day. There were a number of things that I had to do to ensure long-term success. But I did it. And this is what I teach people how to do. Like, you think the symptoms are the problem, which is why you're still in symptoms. As long as you think those are the problem, you're literally just running on a hamster wheel, right? So we've got to focus on the root. The only time I ever feel in a flow state in the present is when I'm creating art. Yeah, it's because you're basically somatically dissociating in that moment, because you're so in your creative mind that it's allowing you to escape your body. That was with me. There were only a few rare times that I used to feel calm, and it was usually whenever, I remember one time in particular, I was at welding school, and this was like 2009, I think, and I hadn't had a break from symptoms in a while. But one day I welded a cross. I created what's called a T-joint. It's like 3 pieces of metal, and I put it in the shape of a cross. I welded it together, and then I put it on a grinder wheel. And I spent like 5 hours welding this into a cross. And I remember looking back, and I was like, wait a second. I just didn't have any symptoms of DPDR or anxiety. Like, it was very noticeable. And it's because I was so deep in my head creating this cross that I wasn't in my body. And I wasn't focusing on symptoms or fears as well. I thought my DPDR is going to get better after 8 years, but I just learned to live in my head all day. So, I mean, Vladimir, I can't, tell you or force you to deal with the root. You might have heard it said there's like the 80-20 rule. 80% of people are willing to put in the work, to change. It's not true. It's 90-10. Maybe less than that, maybe 5%. But let's say 90-10. Only 10% of people are going to actually ever deal with the root. 90% of people are just going to look for one quick fix to the next quick fix. And it's really sad, but I've learned to accept that. It's just how human beings are wired. We're wired to look for the easy way out. But if you're willing to pay the price and do the work, you can get your life back, right? And what I mean by that is you don't have to be in that 90%, Vladimir. You can become that 10%. But you have to get fed up and you have to be willing to pay the price. And I can get on a call within 2 minutes with somebody and I can hear if they're ready to pay that cost. And the people that are ready, you would be shocked at how quickly they can come out of this. 4-7-8 breathing is good. And, that's definitely going to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. But a breathing technique is not going to get you out of this. Again, going back to what I said initially in the live, methodology is only 15% of healing according to a lot of major studies. And so that's exactly what I'm talking about. And I appreciate you mentioning 4-7-8 breathing. That's cool. But everybody's looking for that one technique, guys, and it doesn't exist. There's not one thing that's going to get you out of especially a trauma state. The 4 primary things, according to a lot of major studies, is self-regulation, releasing the buildup in the body, co-regulation, another human being making you feel calm and safe, secure attachment relationship, exposure, which is living life, facing your sensory triggers, and also I would add somatic exposure, facing your body if needed, and then cognitive restructuring, which is getting proper scientific education about what's going on to detach fear and shame. And those are the 4 things that I do with my clients, and that is why it works, because it's been proven to work, right? I'm not teaching a theory, I'm teaching what's already been proven. So we got the scientific evidence, we got the anecdotal evidence, and so, but yeah, what I may teach a client to do some 4-7-8 breathing, well, yeah, of course, like that's good. But to say that is going to get rid of all your symptoms, again, I call it the magical button mentality. It's this belief that there's one thing that's going to get out of this, and it's not that simple. And recovery is also quite nuanced based upon each individual. Like I've got one person I'm working with, they're coming out of a severe breakup and we're having to kind of process through that. I've got somebody, they're kind of healing from narcissistic abuse. I've got like probably 20 people I'm working with that have an extreme existential obsession and rumination. I've got, probably 30 people that have severe health anxiety. I've got, maybe 10 to 15 people that they've got a lot of panic attacks. So what I'm saying is everybody's kind of there are some general things, but a lot of people have unique challenges that they have to face, and that's why coaching is so paramount. So Carpe Diem, you said, what do you mean by paying the price? So go back and listen to this live stream. That's all we're talking about. Again, I think people think sometimes like I'm holding out something from them. But that's only because they don't understand what recovery looks like. You're looking for that one thing that's going to make your symptoms go away. So whenever I'm talking about setting up boundaries, listening to your body, releasing the buildup, whenever I talk about living your life, whenever I talk about co-regulation, all these things, like in your mind, you're like, okay, no, all that stuff I'm sure is good, but what's the cure? I'm talking about the cure. I hate the word cure because it implies that there's that one thing. But all these live streams, I'm giving you the stuff you need to do for free. The only thing I do with my clients is I just personally help them apply those things and give them co-regulation. But the cure is you. The cure is that your body knows how to heal itself. You just need to release the buildup in the body and make lifestyle adjustments and get proper co-regulation for that healing to happen. Just like if you cut your finger, you wear the Band-Aid. The Band-Aid creates the condition so that your body can heal itself. It's no different with getting out of these symptoms. So recovery doesn't look like what you think that it looks like. Like, for example, I've got a client that I worked with today. He was actually in 3 different bands. He's a drummer, and we had a talk, and that's part of what's draining his energy that is keeping him at nervous system overwhelm. Now, that's one of 10 different things that I'm having him do. But I was like, man, you need to consider walking away from at least 2 of these bands. And he did that, and he instantly felt a relief from derealization shortly after walking away from these bands. Because why? Because that's dealing with the roots. He was overworking himself. So what I'm saying is, recovery doesn't look like what you think that it looks like. Sometimes it looks like walking away from a toxic relationship. Sometimes it looks like listening to your body. Sometimes it looks like getting co-regulation. In fact, it always looks like listening to your body, self-regulating, co-regulating. What I'm saying is there's a lot of things that you wouldn't associate with recovery that are part of recovery. You talk about pain in the body. Could years of heavy lifting while not stretching be a factor into why I'm experiencing this? So great question. Yeah, for sure. Overworking the body is definitely a big part of what leads to trauma, which is a state of nervous system overwhelm. And people just start drinking Red Bull and Monster and coffee, and that's representative of their muscling their way through. Instead of listening to their body and self-regulating, they're just doing whatever they can just to stay afloat. And I'm not saying that's you, by the way, but I'm saying and listen, I love the gym. I think it's a wonderful place. I think everybody should be exercising. But as far as heavy weightlifting, even with that, you've got to be careful, especially if your body is in a trauma state. You can really, really push your body a lot further into a trauma state by working out to failure too often. I've started working out about 3 months ago pretty consistently, and I only do 3 days a week, and I give a lot of space for my body to heal, but especially if you're coming out of a trauma state. You taking part in Elvis Week, bro? Yes, actually. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. You ain't never caught a rabbit and you ain't no friend of mine. Somebody said I looked like Vanilla Ice on TikTok, and I did a video where I had the comment up, and then I was like, and then I shook my head, and then I turned on Vanilla Ice. Stop, collaborate, and listen. Ice is back with the brand. Anyway, I thought it was funny. I like this. Carpe Diem says, I see these symptoms as the best thing that could ever happen to me because now I get to change my life. So I have no other choice. Absolutely. And that's what I tell my clients is you have to frame anxiety and panic attacks and trauma and, depersonalization, realization as really the greatest opportunity of your life. These symptoms are like a check engine light on a car. They are revealing to you that there's some work that needs to be done under the hood. And by doing that work, owning your body, releasing the buildup in your body, making your body your safe place, making whatever lifestyle adjustments that you need to make towards health and wellness and regulation, you're going to walk away feeling very, very good. So that's the perspective that I tell people to. Haven't been lifting as heavy, drinking caffeine, and it really hasn't made a difference. Well, again, it's because what about self-regulation? What about co-regulation? What about getting proper scientific understanding? What about sleep? What about nutrition? What about focus, guys? That's what I'm saying. This is what I do in coaching is we really just audit your life because there's a lot of factors that we have to consider. So I'd love to check out your situation and see if I could help solve. Okay. All right, guys. I will go and let you go. Been on here almost 15 minutes. I do got a coaching session starting at 3 p.m., by the way. So you guys know, as far as my RISE program, I know some of you are curious about it. I've actually just shifted where we're not just meeting 3 days a week. We're actually meeting 5 days a week. So for people who work with me, by the way, I can't guarantee anything. We have to jump on a call, make sure I can help. And you have to be committed too. We're very careful with who we let in, but we work with you until you are permanently symptom-free. We also meet 5 days a week on Zoom. And so, plus you get my step-by-step approach to recovery. We go over self-regulation, co-regulation, give you all the neuroscience you need, teach you the lifestyle adjustments you need to make, and we have a lot of coaching time to really audit your life and see what needs to be done. So if you're interested in that, you can apply. There's the 5 Shifts Masterclass. There's a link to that in my profile. Any of my long-form videos, you click the link, watch the free masterclass. It's my gift to you, but there is a link to apply. We'll check out your situation. We'll see what we can do. And it is a ridiculous amount of help that you're not going to find anywhere else. And we really do hold your hand until you're recovered. And the community that we've created is absolutely amazing. People are so hungry, and people are getting out of these symptoms. So that is it, guys. I got to run. 47 years ago tomorrow, Elvis died. Wow, what are the odds of that somebody referenced my hair being like Elvis, and then it looks like it's his anniversary. Thank you, sir, for sharing your time with us. You have a great day. No problem, Phil. It's good to see you as always. Carpe Diem, King, Sumner, Saul, Ishtara, MLR, Vladimir, anybody else who's watching. So good to see you, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you, guys.